The murder of Earth's ambassador. The galaxy was vast, and Earth was but a small, quiet speck in it. For centuries, Earth had been overlooked. Its people seen as insignificant in the grand scheme of interstellar politics. Earth had no major military power, no alliances with the most advanced civilizations. Its influence was limited to trade and diplomacy, and its representatives, though respected, were often dismissed as weak, unimportant, and naive. But that was before the murder of Earth's ambassador. Ambassador Eli Norrin was a well-known figure in galactic diplomacy, often praised for his calm demeanor, his sharp mind, and his unwavering commitment to peace. He had spent decades negotiating treaties, mediating conflicts, and securing trade routes for Earth. To the galaxy's other species, Norrin was seen as a symbol of Earth's peaceful intentions. But on the day of his murder, that image was shattered. In an instant, Norrin had been attending an important diplomatic event on the planet Assassination, a neutral world where leaders from various factions gathered to discuss trade deals and peace agreements. It was supposed to be a routine affair, a meeting that would allow Earth to solidify its place among the stars, to strengthen ties with the galaxy's most powerful species. But that peace would never come. Hours before the conference was set to begin, Ambassador Norrin was found dead in his chambers, his body lying lifeless on the cold marble floor. His throat had been slit with precision, a clean strike that indicated no struggle. The room was eerily quiet, with no signs of forced entry or disturbance. It was as if the ambassador had been betrayed by someone he had trusted, someone close to him. When the news broke, it sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Earth's government was in disarray, unable to process the loss of their most prominent diplomat. Norrin had been more than just a representative, he had been the face of Earth's ambitions. To join the galactic community, his death was a blow, not only to Earth but to the entire peaceful order that had been carefully crafted over generations. At first, the other factions believed it to be a targeted attack. Norrin's position had made him many enemies, especially among the more aggressive factions who had always seen Earth as an easy target. But as the investigation unfolded, something more disturbing came to light. This wasn't just an assassination, it was a statement. The attack had been swift and silent. No security cameras had captured any footage, no witnesses had seen the assassin, and no one had heard a thing. The method of execution was deliberate, professional. Someone had wanted to send a clear message to Earth, and they had done so in a way that left the galaxy horrified. The first conclusion was that it was a political assassination. But as investigators dug deeper, they found that the truth was far more complex. Earth's enemies were too many to count. But who had the power and the interest in silencing Norrin forever, and why? On Ceres 9, the governing council went into lockdown, shutting down all communication and access to the planet. No one could leave or enter without the proper clearance, and the event was postponed indefinitely. The galaxy was in shock, but it wasn't long before the whispers began. There were rumors that the assassination was part of a larger plan. The death of Norrin was just the first piece in a much more dangerous game, and that's when the real fear began to spread. While the galaxy speculated on the identity of the assassin, no one could have predicted what would happen next. Earth, in its grief and anger, reacted in a way no one had expected. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Every major news outlet reported on the tragedy, but there was no outpouring of grief from the galaxy's other powers. To them, Norrin's death was just another in a long list of political casualties. But to the people of Earth, it was personal. They had lost their ambassador, their symbol of peace. And the humans would not sit idly by. In the high chambers of Earth's government, leaders convened in secret. The assassination had lit a fire within them. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about sending a message. Earth was no longer willing to be a bystander in the galaxy's power plays. The humans had stood quietly by for too long now. They would show the galaxy that they could strike back with force. If necessary, they would not let Norrin's death be in vain. And so, the decision was made, a fleet was prepared, and the human military, though small compared to the galaxy's greatest powers, was mobilized with one goal: to make the galaxy understand that humanity was not to be underestimated. The galaxy might have thought that Earth's peaceful nature made them weak, but now they would learn just how wrong they were. As the news of the fleet's mobilization spread, many laughed. They thought the humans, angry and grieving, were making a mistake. The galaxy's powers had long held the belief that humanity, with its small fleets and limited reach, could never hope to challenge the status quo. But they were wrong. In that moment, the galaxy's indifference to Earth's people began to shift. The human fleet was small, but it was filled with a purpose and fury no one had seen before. And they were coming not just for revenge, but for something far more dangerous: the assertion that humans were no longer just myths. They were a force to be reckoned with. The galaxy would soon learn that Earth and its people had the power to rewrite the rules of the stars, and nothing would ever be the same again. Humanity strikes back. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for far too long. They thought Earth was a weak, insignificant player, its people content to remain in the background of galactic affairs. But the murder of Ambassador Norin had ignited something deep within humanity. It was more than just grief, it was the fire of revenge, the drive to show the universe that humanity could no longer be ignored. The human fleet, though small in number compared to the ancient warships of galactic powers, was filled with a newfound purpose. For the first time in their history, the humans were united in a singular goal: to make the galaxy feel the weight of their wrath. Their first target was the faction responsible for Norin's death, the alien race that had orchestrated the assassination to send a message. Humanity's first move was deliberate. They didn't rush into battle with reckless fury. No, they were strategic, calculating every step as they advanced. The humans knew that to make their mark, they would need to strike with precision. They would not only avenge Norin's death, they would make the galaxy understand that humanity was no longer a myth. They were a force to be reckoned with. The first system they attacked was an outlying sector controlled by the alien faction. This was no powerful capital world, but a smaller colony world that had been a hub for trade and military operations. It was the perfect place to send a message. The human fleet arrived without warning, slipping through the vastness of space. Like shadows in the dark, their first wave was a complete surprise. Prepare to engage, Commander Callan said, his voice calm yet filled with an undeniable intensity. He stood at the helm of the flagship, staring at the digital map that displayed the enemy fleet's movements. Earth's forces were small, but they had an advantage. Their technology was innovative, and their crews, though untested, were determined to prove their worth. As the fleet approached the colony world, the enemy was still in the dark, unaware of the impending assault. The human ships, sleek and powerful, slipped into position, each maneuver calculated to minimize risk and maximize impact. With a signal from Callan, the first shots rang out, a series of precision strikes launched from the human ships, cutting through the enemy defenses with terrifying efficiency. Energy blasts tore through the air, striking enemy warships, sending them into disarray. The alien faction, caught completely off guard, scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. The humans were already on them, relentless, unstoppable. They fought not just for vengeance but for the recognition they had long been denied. This is just the beginning, Callan muttered to himself as his fleet moved forward, cutting through the alien defenses. The humans had always been taught to fight with honor, to seek peace. But after the murder of their ambassador, their honor had been shattered. Now, they fought with a cold, calculated fury that left their enemies scrambling for survival within hours. The once protected colony world was in ruins. The enemy forces were decimated, their defenses torn apart, their fleet in tatters. The humans had not just won, they had sent a message to the entire galaxy. Earth was no longer weak. They had a power, and they were willing to use it. As the human fleet moved on to the next target, the news of their success spread like wildfire. The galaxy's great powers, who had long dismissed Earth as a primitive backwater, were now faced with a new reality. Humanity was no longer content to remain in the shadows. They had tasted victory, and they were hungry for more. Across the galaxy, the response from the other factions was swift. The Galactic Union, who had once viewed humanity as a non-threat, now began to take notice. Meetings were called, and military leaders from across the stars gathered to discuss the human fleet's sudden rise to power. But while they debated, they also prepared. We've underestimated them, General Vark of the Krazel fleet said grimly. The humans have shown they will stop at nothing. This is no longer about a single assassination. This is about the humans asserting their place in the galaxy. Zella, the ambassador from the Vorta species, agreed. We've been ignoring Earth for too long. Now, they've shown us their true strength. We need to be ready for whatever comes next. But not everyone in the galaxy was so quick to prepare for war. Some factions still believed that the humans could be negotiated with. They tried to open diplomatic channels, hoping to end the conflict before it escalated further, but to the humans, there was no turning back now. They had lost too much, and they were not going to stop until they had reclaimed their place in the stars. Back aboard the human flagship, Commander Callan was already planning the next phase of their campaign. The first strike had been successful, but this was only the beginning. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity wasn't here to take a back seat. They were here to lead, to claim their rightful place among the stars. Move forward with the next phase, Callan ordered, his voice unwavering. We've just begun to show them what we're capable of. The galactic response to human fleet's victory sent shockwaves through the galaxy. What was once dismissed as a minor species, struggling for survival on a small planet called Earth, was now a power to be reckoned with, and with that, the galaxy's balance of power was thrown into turmoil for centuries. The major factions and alliance of species, each more advanced and powerful than the last, had ruled over the stars. Now, a new player had entered the game, and the galaxy had no idea how to handle it. The first response from the major powers was one of confusion and disbelief. How could humanity, a species so young and seemingly weak, rise so quickly? How had they built an armada capable of such swift and brutal destruction? The galaxy's leaders huddled in their council chambers, scrambling to make sense of the situation. General Varrock, report, the Galactic Union's leader, Ambassador Rena, said as she stood before the council. The humans have taken down an entire fleet. We cannot ignore this any longer, Varrock, the leader of the Krasl fleet, rubbed his temples in frustration. His people had been the first to underestimate Earth, thinking them unworthy of attention. Now they were paying the price. It's more than just their fleet, he said, his voice heavy with concern. They have the will to fight. The humans aren't just defending their territory. They're on a mission to prove something none of us saw coming. The other members of the council were silent, the realization dawning on them that they had been complacent for too long. They had allowed their arrogance to cloud their judgment. The humans weren't just another species, they were survivors, born from the ashes of a world that had been on the brink of collapse. And they had just proven that they were willing to do whatever it took to ensure their survival. We can't afford to ignore them, Ambassador Zella of the Vorta species said, breaking the silence. We've already seen what they're capable of. We've underestimated them before, and that mistake cost us. Now we need to decide, do we risk engaging them in full-scale war, or do we find a way to coexist? But not all were so eager to negotiate. Some of the more war-hungry factions, who had long dominated the galaxy, saw the humans rise as a threat to their own power. They were not interested in diplomacy. They were interested in crushing the humans before they could gain any more ground. If the humans want war, they'll get it, General Varrock snapped. We won't wait for them to grow stronger. We need to strike first. Zella held up a hand. This isn't about war. This is about survival. We don't know what the humans want, what their ultimate goal is. They've proven that they are unpredictable, and that's what terrifies me. Meanwhile, aboard the human flagship, Commander Callan watched the Council's actions from afar. He had been receiving reports on the galaxy's growing anxiety and fear. Earth's fleet was advancing, but it was not without consequences. The galaxy was scared, and they had every right to be. But Callan knew that fear was just the beginning. It was the first step to something bigger. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival anymore, they were fighting for recognition, for a place at the table of galactic power, and if the galaxy didn't accept them, then humanity would make them. Sir, we've intercepted another transmission, the communications officer said, snapping Callan from his thoughts. It's from the Galactic Union. They're requesting a meeting. Callan raised an eyebrow. A meeting? What could they want? They're offering diplomacy, the officer replied. They want to talk. To negotiate, Callan thought. For a moment, his eyes scanning the distant stars. Tell them we'll meet. But make one thing clear, the humans are not interested in being anyone's second choice. They can either accept us as equals, or we will make them. The officer nodded, sending the message. Callan knew this meeting would not be about peace, it would be about establishing humanity's place in the galaxy. The Union might think they could negotiate with humanity, but they would soon learn that Earth's people were not negotiators, they were fighters, survivors. They had already paid the price for peace once before, and they wouldn't do it again. Back in the Galactic Union's council chambers, the news of humanity's response sent another wave of shock. Through the leaders, the humans had agreed to meet, but there was something in the tone of their message that left no room for misinterpretation. This wasn't a negotiation, this was a demand. Are we ready for this? Zella asked, her voice filled with concern. We've underestimated them for too long now. We faced the consequences. The council exchanged uneasy glances. They had feared this moment for decades, but none of them had truly believed it would come to this. They had thought the humans were nothing more than a fleeting species, something to be brushed aside. But now, Earth was here, and they were demanding a seat at the table. The galaxy would never be the same again. Asterisk, the negotiation stars outside the human flagship shimmered with a cold, distant beauty as the fleet prepared for their first meeting with the galaxy's major powers. The situation had escalated quickly. What had started as an act of vengeance was now shaping up to be the beginning of a new chapter for humanity. But there was still so much that remained uncertain. What did the galaxy's leaders want from this meeting? What were they willing to offer? And what did humanity stand to gain? Commander Callan stood on the bridge, looking out at the vast emptiness of space. He had never wanted this, not really. The humans had always preferred peace, trade, and diplomacy. But the murder of Ambassador Norin had shattered that ideal. Now, they were standing on the edge of something much bigger. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for a future, and in order to ensure that future, they had to navigate this delicate moment with care. The Union's transmission had been clear. They wanted a meeting. They had promised to send representatives from the galaxy's largest and most powerful factions. And Earth's leaders had agreed. The stage was set for diplomacy. But Callan knew that this wasn't going to be just another diplomatic mission. This was a test. The galaxy's powers would either accept humanity's rise or risk facing the consequences of underestimating them once again. As the human fleet arrived at the appointed neutral meeting location, an unremarkable planet orbiting, a quiet star tension filled the air. The representatives from the Union were already waiting, their ships gliding silently in the distance, forming an impressive array of warships and diplomatic vessels. The sight was meant to intimidate, but to the human fleet, it felt like a farce. They had shown their power, and now it was time to see if the galaxy was ready to face the reality of humanity's place in it. Callan stood before his officers, each of them ready for whatever came next. "This is not a time for fear," he said, his voice calm but strong. "We will go into this meeting knowing that we stand on equal ground. Humanity has earned that right." As the human fleet's representative ship touched down on the planet's surface, the delegation from the Galactic Union stepped forward. Their leader, an imposing figure named Ambassador Lyris of the Corn species, looked down at Callan with an unreadable expression. Lyris was a seasoned diplomat, known for her sharp mind and even sharper wit. She had overseen many negotiations. But this was different. This wasn't just about trade or peace. This was about the future of the galaxy. "We meet today not as equals, Commander," Ambassador Lyris began, her voice firm. "We meet because the galaxy demands it. The humans have overstepped their boundaries, and we must decide what to do with this new power." Callan met her gaze, unflinching. "We're not here to play games, Ambassador," he replied, his tone measured. "We're here because humanity has been disrespected for too long. The galaxy's powers have always treated Earth as insignificant. And now that we've proven we're no longer a myth, you want to make us prove our worth. Understand this, we're not here to negotiate our place. We're here to make it clear that humanity is no longer an afterthought." The tension was palpable. The other representatives, including those from the Vorta and Krazel species, stood in silence, eyes darting between Callan and Ambassador Lyris. This wasn't just a conversation. It was a battle in itself, a war of words that would determine the future. Lyris narrowed her eyes, her posture unwavering. "You speak with arrogance, Commander. But the galaxy's balance cannot simply be shifted by one species, no matter how powerful you claim to be." Callan leaned forward slightly, his voice low but filled with unspoken authority. "And yet here we are, sitting at this table because your galaxy knows it cannot ignore us any longer. If you want to keep the peace, then you need to understand that humanity has a place in it whether you like it or not. We don't want to rule the galaxy, but we will no longer allow ourselves to be ruled by it." Ambassador Lyris studied him carefully, weighing his words. The galaxy's leadership had always prided itself on stability, on maintaining control. But Earth's sudden rise was a wild card. How could they manage this unexpected force without causing more chaos? "Very well," she said, after what felt like an eternity. "We will not ignore you, but be warned, every action you take has consequences. The galaxy does not bow to anyone, and we will not allow you to disrupt everything we've built." Callan's lips curled into a small smile. But there was no humor in it, disruption or change. As the meeting ended and both sides retreated to their respective ships, Callan felt a heavy weight settle on his shoulders. He had won this first battle, he had made humanity's intentions clear. But the war was far from over. The galaxy's response was still unknown, and the threats from other factions remained. But one thing was certain, humanity had made its presence felt, and there was no turning back. Now, as the human fleet prepared to continue its journey, Callan's thoughts turned to the future. The road ahead was filled with uncertainty, but he was no longer afraid. Humanity had proven its strength, and now it was time to make sure the galaxy knew just how dangerous they had become. The betrayal unfolds. Quiet hum of the human flagships. Engines filled the bridge as Commander Callan stood gazing out at the stars. The meeting with the Galactic Union had ended, and while humanity had successfully secured its place at the negotiating table, there was still much left to be done. The galaxy had heard their message, but the true battle was just beginning. Humanity had proven they weren't to be ignored. But the real question was, would the galaxy truly accept them as equals? Or would they be forced into a war to claim that position? But as the days passed and the fleet continued its advance, a new threat quietly emerged, one that had not been anticipated. The first signs came as small, encrypted messages intercepted by Earth's intelligence systems. At first, they were dismissed as minor disturbances, perhaps a rogue faction, or a simple miscommunication between different sectors, but as more and more signals poured in, it became clear that something was wrong. Someone within the human fleet was leaking information to unknown parties. There was a traitor among them. Callan's eyes narrowed as he read the decrypted messages. They were from someone high within the ranks, someone with access to sensitive intelligence. The traitor was working with an unknown ally, but their intentions were becoming clearer by the hour. Someone within the fleet had been feeding information to the galaxy's most aggressive factions, ones that had long been enemies of the Galactic Union, the very factions humanity had tried to ally with. Callan's heart sank. Could it be that humanity's rise had stirred not only enemies but internal betrayal as well? A betrayal that could tear apart everything they had built in such a short time? The thought of it made his blood run cold. Commander, the communications officer called, breaking Callan's dark thoughts. We've received another transmission. This one is different. It's from the Krazel fleet. The Krazel? Callan repeated, raising an eyebrow. The Krazel had been one of the more difficult factions to deal with in their pursuit of alliances. What do they want now? The officer hesitated. It's not a diplomatic message, Commander. It's a threat. A chill ran down Callan's spine as the transmission played. The voice that filled the room was harsh and filled with venom. It was General Varric, the Krazel leader, one of the more aggressive and unpredictable powers in the galaxy. To the human fleet, Varric's voice echoed, you think you can rise so quickly, claim your place in the stars with your fire and fury, but the galaxy will not bend to you. The Krazel will not stand idle while you think yourselves the new rulers. You have made a grave mistake and now you will pay for it. Prepare yourselves, war is coming. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving a stunned silence on the bridge. The Krazel, it seemed, had joined forces with the faction responsible for Norn's death, an alliance forged in the shadows of diplomacy. Callan's mind raced. It wasn't just a matter of warfare anymore. This was something deeper. The betrayal within their own ranks had opened the door for external enemies to act against them. Humanity, once thought weak and insignificant, was now a target for a galactic-wide coalition of powerful forces. The battle for survival had turned into a battle for control, not just of the stars but of their very future. We've been played, Callan muttered to himself. This was never just about revenge. This was about power elsewhere in the galaxy. The news of the Krazel threat spread like wildfire. The Galactic Union, caught in a delicate web of diplomacy, was forced to confront the reality of the situation. The Krazel had long been a thorn in their side, and now they had aligned themselves with the very factions humanity had made enemies of. The Union had tried to contain the chaos with negotiations, but now it seemed there was no peaceful way forward. Ambassador Zella, who had been working with the humans to form alliances, now found herself at a crossroads. The humans had played their hand and the galaxy's powers were reacting with fear and aggression. It was only a matter of time before the next move would have to be made. Would humanity submit to the galaxy's demands and maintain their place as a lower-tier faction? Or would they rise with even greater fury? Zella had been among the first to realize that humanity was different. They had no illusions about their strength. The humans, with their advanced technology and unshakable resolve, had proven themselves capable of much more than anyone had anticipated. But now, with this new threat emerging from within their ranks, Zella feared that the galaxy's collective forces would not stop until humanity was wiped out entirely, or worse, turned into a puppet state. Back aboard the human flagship, Commander, Callan was ready for action. His resolve hardened, knowing the galaxy would not simply allow humanity to grow unchecked. But there was something else nagging at him, something deeper. The betrayal was personal. Someone within his own fleet had betrayed Earth's cause. That person, whoever they were, had to be dealt with. Gather the fleet commanders, Callan ordered, his voice sharper than ever. We're preparing for a full-scale offensive. The galaxy may think they've cornered us, but they have no idea what we're capable of. The war was about to escalate. No longer was it just about survival, it was about asserting humanity's place as a dominant force in the galaxy. Callan knew it wouldn't be easy, but it would be necessary. The galaxy had misjudged humanity's strength for too long, and now they would pay the price. Asterisk. The descent into Coast human fleet had always been known for its precision and focus, but now everything was different. The galaxy's balance had been shaken, and the stakes had risen to levels no one could have anticipated. Commander Callan could feel the tension in every fiber of his being. The war had escalated far beyond what humanity had bargained for. It wasn't just about avenging Earth's ambassador anymore, it was about survival. Against a galaxy united in its desire to crush them. As the human fleet continued its campaign, they found themselves in the midst of a war unlike any they had fought before. Every move they made was met with an immediate response from their enemies, the Crumbling, who had once seemed like a distant threat, were now a powerful ally of humanity's most dangerous foes, and with their forces allied, the galaxy's powers rallied against the humans, drawing battle lines in space that stretched across the galaxy. Commander Callan stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching as the latest reports came in. The Crumbling had begun mobilizing their fleets, preparing to strike against human forces. But it wasn't just the Crumbling that had become a threat. The betrayal within their own ranks had opened the door for even more chaos. The traitor, the one who had been leaking human fleet movements to the enemy, was still unknown, and the time to unmask them was running out. The ship's communications officer looked up from his console. "Commander, we've received intelligence. The Crumbling have moved into position. They're forming a blockade in the Alpha 5 sector." Callan clenched his jaw. "How many ships?" "At least 30, the officer responded, "but there are reports of reinforcements on the way from the eastern sectors. This isn't just a skirmish. They're preparing for a major offensive." Callan exhaled slowly, his eyes narrowing. The blockade would cut off the human fleet's primary route to the galactic core. Without that route, their chances of survival would be slim. The galaxy's greatest military forces were closing in, and the walls were starting to close around them. "We won't wait for them to close in," Callan said, his voice low and steady. "Set course for the blockade. We fight our way through." As the orders were given and the fleet began to move, Callan couldn't shake the feeling that this would be the defining moment for humanity. It wasn't just about military tactics anymore. This was about showing the galaxy that humanity could not be stopped, that they would not bow down to anyone. Elsewhere in the heart of the galaxy, the alliance of alien factions watched as humanity's moves unfolded. The Cruzil's military might have been a formidable force for centuries, and now they were playing a pivotal role in the downfall of humanity. Their alliance with the Vorta, a race known for their mind-bending technology, was a calculated move. Together, they formed a coalition of unmatched power. Ambassador Lyris, a senior leader from the Galactic Union, paced back and forth in the meeting room. She had been the first to warn of humanity's rising power, and now the consequences of their underestimation were clear. The human fleet had broken through every defensive line they had thrown at them, and now the situation was spiraling out of control. "If we don't act now, we'll lose everything," Lyris muttered to herself, her mind racing. The Cruzil's betrayal had changed the course of the war. But there was one thing they hadn't accounted for: the human spirit. Back on Earth, the news of the growing conflict spread to every corner of the planet. The people of Earth, once on the sidelines of galactic affairs, were now caught in the heart of a full-scale interstellar war. They watched as their fleet fought against the odds, and their fear turned into resolve. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, but they had forgotten something crucial. Humanity was capable of more than just survival. They were capable of greatness. The streets of Earth were alive with news reports of the battle at Alpha 5. Humanity, driven by the memory of their lost ambassador, was fighting not just for their survival but for their dignity, their place in the galaxy. Earth's people rallied behind their fleet, offering support in any way they could. It wasn't just the military now, it was a global effort. Every ship that launched into battle carried the hopes and dreams of an entire species. As the human fleet approached the blockade, the air was thick with anticipation. Commander Callan stood at the forefront, ready for the battle ahead. The Cruzil ships loomed in the distance, and the vast array of enemy warships filled the space around them. It was a battlefield unlike any the humans had faced before: vast, overwhelming, and unyielding. But they had one advantage that the galaxy's powers didn't: their sheer will to survive. "We won't go down easily," Callan muttered, his eyes locked on the approaching blockade. "For Earth, for Norrin, we fight." The first shots rang out as the human fleet engaged the enemy. The blockade began to shift, enemy ships reacting to the sudden onslaught. The humans, though outnumbered, fought with everything they had, pushing forward with incredible determination. Every human ship became a symbol of defiance, of refusal to bow to the powers that sought to destroy them. The battle raged on, and as it did, a growing realization spread through the galaxy. Humanity wasn't just fighting for their own survival, they were fighting for a new future. A future where they would no longer be seen as weak or insignificant. They had already shown the galaxy their strength, their resilience, and their resolve. But with every victory, the enemies grew stronger, and the galaxy's true rulers began to make their final move. What would happen next? Could humanity hold their ground against the overwhelming forces of the galaxy's elite? Or would this be the final test that determined the fate of an entire species? The shifting sands of Worth Galaxy's foundations were trembling under the weight of humanity's wrath. The human fleet, battered and bloodied but unbowed, had smashed through the Krasl blockade at Alpha 5 with a ferocity that surprised even their most hardened enemies. Every ship that fell in battle, every victory won, seemed to fuel a fire within them, a fire that refused to be extinguished. But even as the human fleet moved forward, the galaxy's oldest powers were already planning their next move. They had underestimated humanity once, and they would not make the same mistake again. The Krasl, who had once been on the sidelines, were now a major force in the war, their alliance with humanity's enemies making them an even greater threat. The Vorta, the Krasl, and the other factions that had long ruled the galaxy were determined to bring humanity to its knees. However, the human fleet's victory had already sent a clear message: they were no longer an insignificant species to be ignored. They had come to stay, and the galaxy would either bend to their will or face the consequences. Meanwhile, aboard the human flagship, Commander Callan stood in the command center, his mind sharp and focused, yet filled with the burden of what lay ahead. The Krasl fleet had retreated, but their retreat was not out of fear. It was a tactical move, a sign that the Krasl were preparing for something much larger. Report, Callan said, his voice steady as always. The enemy is regrouping, Commander, the tactical officer replied. The Krasl are forming a new line of defense around the Galactic core. They've pulled back their remaining fleets to the edge of the system. Callan's expression remained stoic, but he felt the pressure mounting. He knew the Krasl and their allies would soon strike again, and when they did, it would be unlike anything humanity had ever faced. We're not just fighting for survival anymore, Callan muttered. We're fighting for control. The human fleet was no longer just a reactive force. It had become a symbol of defiance, a symbol of humanity's strength. Each victory they claimed was a loud and clear statement that the galaxy was no longer under the control of the old powers. It was time for a new order, one in which humanity would no longer be a bystander. But the galaxy had no intention of allowing humanity to take the reins so easily. A new coalition led by the Krasl had been formed in the shadows, and it was stronger than anything the humans had ever encountered. The Vorta, the Zix, and other powerful factions had joined forces, determined to stamp out humanity's rise. Before it could spread any further, they saw Earth's victory not as a lesson, but as a challenge to their very existence. We can't let this continue, said Ambassador Zella of the Vorta species, her voice filled with grim determination. The humans are moving too fast. If we don't act now, they'll overwhelm us. General Vark of the Krasl was equally resolute. We've underestimated them for too long now. They are a threat we cannot ignore, but we're not without our resources. The coalition is ready. The humans won't stop until they have what they want, Zella said, her gaze fixed on the galactic map before them. We need to strike before they get too comfortable. We must cripple their fleet, cut off their reinforcements, and show them that the galaxy isn't theirs for the taking. As the coalition forces assembled, Callan prepared for the inevitable counterattack. Humanity had faced a formidable foe before, but this time, they would not only be up against the best fleets in the galaxy, they would be fighting against everything the galaxy had to offer. The true test was about to begin. The war zone is about to get much bigger, Callan said quietly to his officers, his gaze unwavering. But we've already proven that we can fight. We've already shown that they can't push us around. We will strike back harder than they expect. He turned to the helmsman. Prepare the fleet. We're heading into the heart of the galaxy. The human fleet set its course, moving toward the galactic core, the heart of the coalition's power. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but Callan knew that humanity's survival depended on their ability to push forward, to show the galaxy that they were not just a force to be reckoned with, they were the future. As the fleet advanced, Callan couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was on the brink of something far greater than anyone could have predicted. This was no longer just about war, it was about the future of the galaxy itself. The human fleet had become a symbol of change, of a new order that was being forged with every battle. But as the human fleet approached the core, something unexpected happened. A new force, far beyond anything they had encountered before, appeared. On the horizon, the darkness of space rippled as an unknown entity, cloaked in shadow, emerged from the void. The unknown force was massive, its presence unlike anything the humans had ever seen. What is that? The communications officer asked, voice trembling with fear. Callan stared at the dark shape, his mind racing. He had no idea what they were up against. But one thing was certain, the galaxy was about to be thrown into a conflict unlike anything it had ever experienced.